Hi guys, so in this module we're going to start writing your first full-length essay. And essays, of course, are kind of the foundation of pretty much all college writing. As you get higher up, you'll hear us talk more about discussion boards. And discussion boards will be, 300 to 500 words, but they're still structured just like an essay is. Many of you, many of the longer short answer responses on tests will also have a word count, say 300 to 500 words. Again, they're essentially essays. So writing essays is absolutely crucial to success in college. And like with the descriptive and narrative paragraphs, which are kind of the easiest kind to write and then the most personal, we're going to start with those same kinds when we're talking about writing essays. And they do work very similarly. Remember, an essay is kind of like an elongated paragraph. So let's talk a little bit more about what I'll be looking for in these and where you go from here. So you might have noticed that it's called a descriptive narrative essay, and before we were talking about descriptive paragraphs and narrative paragraphs separately. Well, the different kinds of essays are called modes, or paragraphs are called modes. And so here we tend to combine descriptive and narrative together because otherwise the essay wouldn't be very interesting, right? So if you were to do a purely descriptive essay, it would just be describing something. There would be no real element of time or message. It would really be pretty boring. Similarly, a purely narrative essay with no description in it would just be a plot summary, and it would not be very interesting to read. So we put these together because they're similar and they work better when they're together. Adding description makes the narrative, the story part more engaging, more interesting to read, more likely for the reader to relate to it. And adding the narrative part to the descriptive gives you a story to tell, a reason to describe what you're describing. So they're often easier when they're put together too. I think you'll find it makes more sense. But like with the descriptive and narrative paragraphs individually, you do want to make sure that you have a story with a message, the narrative part, and you want to make sure you're using the 5 senses, the descriptive details. So kind of a recap of those paragraphs, because I know that was like a couple months ago. So the goals were to tell a story with a message by using vivid details. Those were the things that the two had, well, really, they kind of together had in common. Your primary strategies for these were description, telling a story, and including a message. So with the narrative paragraphs in particular, I remember I asked you to use description with those, not just tell me a series of events. It was to help prepare you for this assignment later on, since we had already were building off of what we did in the descriptive. And the prompt words are going to be very similar to the ones we saw before, but the primary ones are going to be tell, so tell me about an experience, or describe. Those are the ones you're going to see most often that kind of cue you in to it being this type of essay. So for analyzing the prompt, again, we want to look at those keywords. So describe, show, tell, explore, and illustrate, and kind of develop a topic from the prompt. So what is the prompt asking me to describe? What are some of the first things that come to mind when I read the prompt? That helps you get, just your starting point. Since you're talking about personal experience here, it's not going to require as much, in-depth thought. You're probably not going to want to do a lot of mind mapping or stuff. You'll be able to reach kind of back into your own memories and find what you want to write about. So then you want to develop the thesis statement. So let's say that we want to describe the most important object in your room. This would just be for a purely descriptive. The most important object in my room is blank, and then you'll add the reason why. The most important object in my room is blank because blank. You will notice this is very similar to how we did a topic sentence before. Topic sentences and thesis statements are really constructed in very similar ways. The difference between a thesis statement and a topic sentence is normally that the thesis statement has the claim and then the 3 topics of your main paragraphs, whereas the topic sentence is only really talking about what's happening in that one paragraph. So descriptive narrative essays normally tell a story with a message. We talked about that before. So after kind of choosing a topic, you may want to recall the event and list details and focus on how you learned the lesson or message. It's not enough to say what you learned. You want to tell the reader how you did it, because that tells them about you and that tells them more about your situation. Lists and outlines are particularly effective pre-writing strategies here. And The pre-writing assignment and the outline that you're going to be doing in this module will really kind of help you to get the details and to build the different parts of this essay. So when you're choosing your evidence, you want to make a list of sensory details you remember for each part of the story. And like with the descriptive paragraphs, you want to list at least 3 details you saw, 2 you heard, and 1 each that you smelled, tasted, and felt. You may not use all of these details, but it will be good to have a bank to draw from. And you will want to do this for each of your 3 body paragraphs to make sure that you have a good batch of details that you can pull from if you need to add that description in. So with our paragraphs, we all pretty much, they had the same structure, right? Like topic, sentence, exposition, transition, sentence. Well, with essays, we're going to have the same basic structure, intro, body, and conclusion, but how you introduce the ideas, what you put in those body paragraphs will be a little different depending on the different modes. So as I said before, descriptive narrative essays normally convey a message through a story, and common structures are based on their descriptive elements, themes, or narrative events. So there are ways we can organize our paragraphs to best bring out the ideas. And I've included 3 structures here that basically are outlines for you to work from, to help you to kind of get an idea of which one's going to be best for your situation, the story that you want to tell, and kind of give you a template to work from to make this a little bit easier. So in the first sample structure, which I call journey, you start with your hook and your first paragraph. You often want to start in the middle of the most important moment in the story, tell why that moment was important, and then end on the thesis statement that outlines the lesson. The 2 college admissions essays in the sample essays are really good examples of doing this. In the second paragraph, you kind of tell the reader what you were like before this moment. Give them some context. Help them to get a sense of where your starting point was, so that they'll have a better sense of why the lesson was important and where you ended up. And then in paragraph 3, talk about the main lessons you learned from this event and how you learned those lessons. How did these experiences help you to learn? And then 4, you want to talk about the applications of those lessons. In other words, how is your life better now because of what you learned from this event or this story? And the final paragraph, you kind of are looking to the future and talking about how the lessons will be used in the future. The second structure that we commonly see in descriptive narrative essays, I call the primarily descriptive. So it's focused less on narration and more on description. I prefer you not use this one as much here because the assignments are kind of more geared toward narrative, but I wanted to include it just in case you have maybe you have a really important object, and that object tells a lot about you, so you might use this. So in the sample structure 2, the primary descriptive one, you'll start by telling a short version of the story that illustrates the object or person being talked about, and then the thesis statement about why that object or person is important. And in paragraph 2, you're going to list reasons why it's important, or details grouped by sense, or a walkthrough. So let's say you're talking about the most important place to you. You might say, this is the most important place because of my history with this place. It's where I go to relax, and it's where I envision my future. So that would be an example of the first group, the reasons why it's important. So then the first one would be my history. Another way you can approach this type of structure is by details. So you could say, I like this place because of how it smells, how it sounds, and what I see there. So then that would be, each paragraph would be 1 sentence. The third way you can approach this is you begin a walkthrough. So when I get to this place, this is what I see, or on my way to this place, this is what I see. When I get there, this is what I see. When I'm leaving, this is what I see. With this structure, you want to make sure that you are consistent. So if in paragraphs 3 and 4, you want to use the same pattern that you chose into. So if your pattern is group of reasons, then in paragraphs 3 and 4, you're going to talk about groups of reasons. If your pattern is details, group by sense, in 3 and 4, you're still going to talk about senses. If your pattern is a walkthrough, you're still going to continue that walkthrough. What you don't want to do is in paragraph 2, talk about first group of reasons why it's important, and then in paragraph 3, do details group by sense, because that's not a good structure. That's not going to make sense to the reader. So whatever pattern you choose, stick with it. And then in paragraph 5, you'll recap the importance, summarize your main points, and explain how this will benefit you in the future. The third structure I'll call the theme structure, and this kind of goes through a story and then talks about the main lessons that you learn from the story. So from this event, I learned to be patient, I learned resilience, and I learned empathy. And then, you'll see in the first paragraph, she'll tell a very short version of the story, just a couple of sentences, and the thesis focuses on the main lessons. So in paragraph 2, you're going to explore lesson 1. So let's say I learned patience. You would start by including a sentence or two about how you were impatient before. Then you would explain the problem here at this event, how you worked through it, and how working through that helped you to develop that patience. And then you would end the paragraph by showing your transition sentence is going to show how you've applied patience to other areas of your life since. So it's kind of like the journey structure, but it's shrunken down where each paragraph is a mini journey. In paragraph 3 and 4, you're going to repeat the structure in paragraph 2 with lessons 2 and 3. So if they were patience, resilience, and empathy, well, in paragraph 2, you're talking about patience. So in paragraph 3, you're going to do the same thing with resilience. In paragraph 4, you're going to do the same thing you did in paragraph 2 with empathy. And then in paragraph 5, you're going to recap your thesis and your main points, and again, explain how you'll use these lessons in the future. So then after you've done those steps, you're going to create a rough outline. You'll use your thesis statement and one of the structures that I talked about as a basis for your outline. And then you can list the main pieces of evidence you'll use for each body paragraph. I will walk you through how to do this in the outline assignment. Your body paragraphs are going to follow the same basic structure as the descriptive narrative paragraphs. There are typically 3 body paragraphs in this type of essay, and although there will be situations where maybe it would work better if there were 2 or 4 body paragraphs, for now I would really prefer you to stick to the 3 as much as possible, just because it's easier that way. It's easier to kind of get a sense of how everything works together. And in these body paragraphs, as always, remember to include your evidence, topic sentences, transition sentences, and explanation for why evidence is important. In your introduction, you will have your hooks, context, and your thesis, right? Remember that? So your good ideas for hooks or descriptive details or short anecdotes, and you can see in the structures that depending on the structure chosen, those were what were used in that first opening part. And then pretty much all 3 of them, you're providing some background information on the story, right? Because you want to talk about why this moment was important and how it led to the thesis. The thesis statement will need to be the last sentence in your introduction, and for these, I really, really want you to use the claim and evidence, the X equals A plus B plus C format. Going ahead and getting used to that now is going to help you a great deal when it comes to later essays in this class, and when it comes to thinking about how to outline and write your essays in other classes. Eventually, you may get to the point where you don't need that rigid format, but using it now is going to help you more than I can possibly tell you. In your conclusion, remember you're going to want to paraphrase the thesis. Do not copy it word for word. That just looks lazy, so you're going to want to rewrite it in your own words. Then briefly summarize the main points in your body and end with a so what statement. Here, the best so what statements are going to be how what you have learned has helped you or will help you, or what you'll do with this lesson in the future. And then, as always, you want to edit for clarity. A big thing with this type of essay is don't assume that the reader has information or knows what you know. So assume the reader knows nothing about it, and make sure the order of events is logical. Of course, you also always want to proofread. So that takes us to the end of this presentation. I look forward to reading your essays, and I will talk to you guys soon.